What is the end game for Tigray's rebels? My guest is the spokesperson for the Tigray People's Liberation Front, Getachew Reda, who joins me on the line from the Tigrayan regional capital, Mekelle, now. Welcome to Hardtalk.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you this. We see the terrible suffering that millions of people are experiencing in your region as a result of, 8-9 months of conflict. Why is it that your side, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, appears intent on intensifying the fighting rather than ending it?
Well, it's exactly the same reason why we took up arms and tried to liberate our people from the suffering you've alluded to. In fact, we do not consider ourselves rebels. We are a legitimately elected government who was removed from the capital by Abiy and his partners in crime, the Amhara expansionist forces, and the Eritrean regime. So these people, these partners in crime, have brought all kinds of untold miseries on our people. And we did everything in our power to bring together all our efforts to liberate every square inch of Tigrayan territory from the invaders. Of course, this crisis, the humanitarian crisis you've been alluding to, of course, our people, millions of our people are suffering from this man-made crisis was systematically engineered and generated by the very people who invaded our territory, who invaded our people.
It's hugely important that we talk about the humanitarian crisis, and we'll do so in just a minute. But first, to talk about the military situation, I referred to intensification on your part, because in June, we know that Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, declared a ceasefire. The Ethiopian forces withdrew from the city you're in, Mekelle. You claimed a victory, and he said that his forces would stop fighting. But since then, your forces have pushed beyond Tigray's regional borders into Amhara, into Afar. You are now taking the fight beyond your own borders.
Look, we have not yet liberated a significant part of Tigray. The western part of Tigray is still in the hands of either Eritreans or Amhara expansionist forces, as well as federal ANDF forces. And the joke that Abiy did declare a unilateral ceasefire in the 20th of June is simply a joke, because it was only a decision made by Abiy once his strongest military units in Tigray were absolutely decimated by our forces. So we vowed then, and will continue to vow even now, that until such time that the very war apparatus, military apparatus that wrought havoc in Tigray ceases to operate, as long as there continues to be a threat to our people, safety and security of our people, will continue to take whatever action is necessary to make sure the guns are silenced. Because there continues to be a concerted effort on the part of Abiy and his partners, both Amhara expansionist forces as well as the Eritrean forces, to cow us into submission, to continue to perpetrate the kind of suffering, kind of heinous crimes that they have been committing against our people.
How far are you prepared to go? The world's media, the world's media saw just the other day that your forces seized Lalibela, the very famous site of ancient churches in Amhara region. We also see your forces in Afar region. There are tens and tens of thousands of newly displaced people because of the expansion of the territory controlled by your forces. How far are you prepared to go?
There are two things here. We have to make sure the safety and security of our people is secure. And to do so, we have to make sure that Abiy and his forces will not be in a position to come back and haunt our people anymore. Abiy has continued to maintain a chokehold on our people. He has cut off communications, he has cut off electricity, he has cut off access to humanitarian aid, and he wants us to continue what he has failed to achieve in the war front, to continue through the kind of siege he has imposed on the people of Tigray. So we have made it abundantly clear that until such time that such a siege is lifted and that our people are back to normalcy, that no amount of security threat continues to be posed against our people by Those Eritreans or Ethiopians or the Amhara expansionists will continue to take whatever action is necessary.
So to be clear, then, let's keep this as concise as we can. To be clear, you're saying that as things stand right now, you have on your side, that is the TPLF side, Tigrayan People's Liberation Front side, you have no interest in a ceasefire right now.
We have made it abundantly clear that we will agree to a ceasefire, a negotiated ceasefire, as long as the conditions we have put forward are met. These conditions have nothing to do with additional infrastructural facilities on Abiy's part, no additional arrangements on the federal government's part. It's about switching on telecommunications. It's about switching on banking services. It's about switching on electricity. This does not require any amount of effort on Abiy's part. He switched off those services.
I understand you're saying that the Ethiopian government and its allies must open up all of the services, the communications, the supply routes into Tigray as a precondition for ceasefire. But the U.S. government, never mind the Addis government, the U.S. government is saying that another immediate, urgent precondition for a ceasefire must be you withdrawing your forces from Amhara and from Afar regions. And I want to know if you're prepared to do that.
We're not prepared to do that. While we understand where the Americans are coming from, while we understand the kind of exerted effort they have, the kind of concerted efforts they have exerted on behalf of our people, we are very grateful to that. But we totally beg to differ when it comes to withdrawal of our forces back to Tigray, because we still have to liberate every square inch of Tigray territory. The West is still in the control of Amhara expansionists, the Eritreans, and the federal forces. Second, we don't have any security arrangement which will ensure that Abiy, with his declared intention to commit genocide in Tigray, will not come back and unleash the kind of suffering he had perfected into an art form the last 9 months.
I'm listening very hard to what you're saying. And when you accuse Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, whose ruling party, let us not forget, did win a crushing majority of seats in the federal parliament just a couple of months ago, when you accuse...
I consider that a joke.
Well, you say it's a joke, but when he is accused by people on your side of genocide, I'm wondering whether you're really saying that there can be no peace as long as Abiy Ahmed is still in power in Addis Ababa. Is that what you're saying?
I don't care if he sticks around in Arat Kilo, but what I care more about is whether he is in a position to threaten the safety and security of our people anymore. Whether he stays put in Arat Kilo is a totally different story. Ethiopians are entitled to pick their own leader. And if they want to maintain Abiy Ahmed as their leader, even if he presides over the disintegration of the nation, that is the least of my problem at this point in time.
Hang on, Abiy Ahmed isn't their leader, he's also your leader. You are an Ethiopian.
I respectfully disagree. He's not my leader. I didn't take part in the elections. And I would have
you do not live in a separate state called Tigray. You live in Ethiopia, and Tigray is one region within Ethiopia.
Yes, I live in Ethiopia, but I live in a territory which we, thanks to the struggle of our people, have liberated from the chokehold of Abiy Ahmed. Except that he wants to extend his chokehold through other means, because he happens to control the switch in Addis. But
so that's your agenda, is it? It's separatism. What this is really all about, it's important people around the world know this, is that you are seeking entire separation from Ethiopia. You no longer regard Addis Ababa and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed as legitimate rulers of your country.
No, I don't consider Abiy Ahmed as the legitimate leader, not only of Tigray, but also the Oromos or even the Amhara. So as far as we're concerned, it's separatism to the extent that there is a tendency of separatism in Tigray. It's imposed on us. It is because Abiy and his partners in crime caused the kind of suffering which no one in their right mind could have imagined would come from a government that considers them its own. So, to the extent that there is a tendency of separatism, I don't think this was something we willfully pursued. This was not something that was part of our agenda. It still is not part of our agenda, but we have to make sure that our people have their right to self-determination, and they should have unfettered access to the full exercise of this right Whether Abiy is considered a legitimate leader by the rest of the world is of no relevance as far as we're concerned.
When I hear you use this kind of language, I then read what Abiy Ahmed said to Ethiopians just the other day. He said that he was calling up all able-bodied civilians who could serve to join the military. He said, we need to, quote, halt the destruction of the treasonous and terrorist TPLF organization and the machinations of foreign hands once and for all. So you talk of separatism. He describes you as treasonous and terrorist. There is no reason to believe that this conflict is going to get anything but much worse.
You should stand to be corrected. I didn't say we are for separatism. To the extent that there is a tendency of separatism, it is imposed upon us. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that our people are fighting to the nail to make sure that their self-determination rights are fully exercised, fully protected. Whether that will result in independence is an entirely different matter. As far as we're concerned, Abiy committed genocide in the people of Tigray. He didn't do it simply because he was forced into it. It was because there was a method to the madness that was visited upon Tigray. There was a method, a systematic nature of the campaign that he unleashed against the people of Tigray. His forces committed rape. His forces committed forced disappearances. His forces committed all kinds of heinous crimes.
We'll get to the accusations of atrocities, egregious abuses of human rights.
I'm not talking about accusations.
We'll get to them because, frankly, you know that they apply to your side as well as Abiy's side in this conflict, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. But before we get there, let us just consider the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, civilians, who might listen to this conversation between you and me and might be in despair because they know that the tone you are taking, just as the tone taken in Addis Ababa, suggests this conflict is going to get worse. 400,000 people, according to the UN, are already facing man-made famine because of it. We see hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people already displaced because of this conflict, and you appear to be prepared to see those numbers get much worse.
It would be unfair to accuse us of intensifying the conflict. The ball is in Abiy's court. It is for Abiy to agree to the very terms we have put forward, because it doesn't require, like I said earlier, it doesn't require an additional arrangement on his part. All he has to do is switch off the services, okay? Once he does that, we can sit together and negotiate on conditions for a negotiated ceasefire. He wants us to continue to maintain his chokehold on our people. He wants us to continue to bombard our people. He sends divisions after divisions simply because he has claimed that he has declared unilaterally a ceasefire. Doesn't mean it was indeed a ceasefire. In fact, his call to arms to the entire civilian population of Ethiopia is another form of calling on genocide against the people of Tigray.
We've discussed Abiy Ahmed, and you've used your accusations many times. Let's move on. I want to know whether the humanitarian assistance desperately needed by hundreds of thousands of people who are facing famine is actually reaching them right now. The World Food Programme chief says that hundreds of trucks a day are needed to deliver urgent aid to those people. Are trucks getting through, yes or no?
They're not getting through. I know of 178 trucks that have gotten through, but it is the tip of the iceberg compared to the kind of volume that is required to feed hundreds of thousands of people. Abiy Ahmed's forces are obstructing the traffic. They are coming up with all kinds of excuses. In fact, they are using conflict that is taking place in areas where there is no traffic whatsoever, and he is giving all kinds of excuses and pretexts to obstruct food convoys. And of course, I again reiterate that the ball is in Abiy's court, and it is for him to relent on his chokehold on Tigray, to allow even humanitarian agencies to have access to cash, for God's sakes. He has cut off banking services, and humanitarian organizations do not have access to cash.
If we're talking about the humanitarian crisis, we then have to talk about the allegations of terrible, horrifying abuses and atrocities committed against civilian populations in Tigray and the surrounding regions. Now, I know that human rights groups, independent observers, have laid accusations at the door of the Ethiopian military forces, but they have also laid serious accusations at your door too. And today I'm interviewing you, not the authorities in Addis. So how do you respond, for example, to the latest reports that your forces in the TPLF bombarded displaced civilians just days ago in Galikoma town in Afar region, and according to reports, many dozens, possibly a couple of hundred civilians, including many scores of children, were killed in the TPLF attack?
You know, we are against impunity of any sort, whether it comes from Abiy or from any force whatsoever. As far as this Galikoma incident is concerned, we have made it abundantly clear that we're open for investigation, independent investigation. But to put matters in perspective,
well, you must know. You're a senior advisor to the TPLF governing authority. You must know whether your military forces, the Tigrayan Defense Forces, did bombard civilians and cause multiple casualties.
You know, the story that Galikoma was bombarded by our forces, an absolute lie. You know how I know? Because our forces were operating there, our commando units neutralized an Afar special unit, and it's only the Afar special units while retreating who destroyed a government warehouse. But the claim that hundreds of children are killed is something we take seriously. But as far as we're concerned, it is not the work or the job of our military forces.
Well,
because our military
people
forces
might wonder how real your investigation is going to be if you've already dismissed the accusations as lies.
I'm calling for, in fact, we're working with UN representatives here to send a team to see for themselves what did happen there.
See, you've had months. Well, hang on. Let's go through it. You've had months and months to investigate the very serious allegations backed by important work done by Reuters news agency and others into what exactly happened in a small settlement called Maikadra, which is a mixed community of Tigrayans and Amhara people. And according to multiple eyewitnesses, Tigrayan youths working alongside TPLF forces shot, stabbed and killed hundreds of Amhara civilians. You've had months to investigate that. You tell me what you found.
You know, we still are open for investigation, even in the case of Maikadra. As far as we know, we're not in a position to even field.
Excuse me, you've had what is it? You've had eight months to investigate. What have you discovered in 8 months?
You know, Stefan, I will give you a rudimentary idea of what was happening the last 6-7 months. We were struggling for our lives. We were training our people. We were cornered in many parts of Tigray. And of course, we had to come back and reassert ourselves. We still are open for investigation. But, you know, the story about Maikadra is a story of advertising. You keep saying something 1,000 times over, and you end up believing it. Because we were cut off from media. We were denied of any access to communications. And every story that was churned out by Abiy Ahmed ended up becoming a reality.
Simple question. Are your forces using child soldiers?
We're not using child soldiers because mature soldiers have never been short supply. But there are children who want to join the army because of the suffering that they have suffered, because their parents have found themselves at the receiving end of Isaias or Abiy's high-handed tactics. But we refuse because we have tons of people lining up to join our ranks. We don't have to use child soldiers.
So the pictures that have been shown on Ethiopian TV of children captured during conflict with TPLF forces, they're all fake, are they?
They're fake because Abiy's forces are not in a position to even take prisoners because they are retreating towns after towns. They have already abandoned practically half of the country. And they would have you believe that they have prisoners. How could they have prisoners? They are simply rounding up helpless children who are returning from Saudi Arabia or helpless children in many parts of Addis Ababa who are aching out a living, selling all kinds of commodities or doing all kinds of errands, and then parading them on TV as prisoners of war. That's an absolute lie.
Let's talk about the future. Right now, as we've discussed in this interview, your forces are fighting in Amhara, they're fighting in Afar, you're fighting Eritrean soldiers who are on Ethiopian territory, and of course you're fighting the Ethiopian national forces as well. You've just, as I understand it, signed some sort of military alliance deal with the rebels in Oromo. It seems that you want to fragment Ethiopia, to foment fighting on many multiple fronts across Ethiopia. Is it your desire to tear apart your own country?
No, it's not our desire to tear apart the country. Even if we were to decide to become independent, we still want the rest of Ethiopia to be intact. I'm not saying we are fighting to become independent, but I wouldn't rule that out, because the tendency on the part of the population is that probably it's not a good idea to stick around. But the point is, we are doing the most responsible thing under the circumstances. The OLF, whether it is considered terrorist by Abiy or not, that's secondary, is significant, is playing a significant role in a significant part of the country. And we are also reaching out to other political organizations, political entities, who would have one way or another to contribute to the continuity of the Ethiopian state.
I find your answers very interesting, and to be honest, I also find the way you just looked rather, you gave me a smile when you talked about your alliance with the rebel forces in Oromo. I'm just wondering, when one leading analyst says that there is a real possibility, a real possibility of genocidal violence in Ethiopia, and it is increasing week upon week, do you agree with him?
We are clearly seeing signs of genocide being authored, being systematically pushed by the Prime Minister himself. He's been referring to the people of Tigray as weeds to be got rid of. This kinds of vitriolic propaganda is obviously creating tension. So of course, the writing is on the wall. So our arrangement with the OLF, for example, our arrangement with other political organizations is to make sure that there is some sort of responsible transitional arrangement which would somehow avoid the kind of calamities aimed Abiy's irresponsible behavior would likely lead to.
Well, we have to keep watching and hoping that the worst can be avoided in your country. I thank you very much, Getachew Reda, for joining me from Mekelle. Thank you very much indeed.